So this is a general thematic introduction to the course. What you've received already is a practical course introduction. Tells you what the requirements for the course are, how the course will run. Please watch that. This is to tell you what the course is about. As the syllabus says, this is a general introduction to business ethics. But I'd like to get more specific about the way I've structured the course, the kind of readings that I've put up. Weeks 1 through, I guess, 5, beginning with Saracen's introduction to his management manual, and then proceeding through week 2, which is a couple of readings that are in the general space of Saracen and his business philosophy. Then Milton Friedman's classic social responsibility of business is to increase its profits. And then week 4, Albert Zikar's Is Business Bluffing Ethical? And these related readings that you can think of the first 5 weeks of the course as classics in business ethics. That is, I think that what these essays do is get to really the fundamental issues in the philosophy of business and the way that ethics connects or doesn't connect with business. So I think that these readings are really a great way to familiarize yourself not only with really central essays, central texts in the development of business ethics in America, at least, but also the fundamental issues involving the relationship between ethics and business. But these first 5 weeks, really basically the Saracen, the Friedman, and the Carr are really what I consider to be the most important and best things ever written that I've read in the field of business ethics. And the kind of things that I think every student of business ethics should read, whether they agree with them or not. You probably couldn't agree with all of them since they're so opposed. But just to give you a sense of what the field is about and to really expose you to what I would consider to be the best readings in the field. So, weeks 1 through 5 can be thought of as classics in business ethics that raise fundamental issues about the relationship between ethics and business. Beginning in week 7, we move to a more topical approach. That is, when I think about what issues in business ethics are fundamental and perhaps not studied enough, these are the ones that come to mind. First, in week 7, ethics and employment. Business ethics is not just about being a business person in the sense of having your own business or being a high level executive in business. We're all involved in business to some degree or another because we have jobs, because we are employed. And I think that the ethics of employment, the ethics of what it means to be an employee, is a pretty rich field of business ethics and understudied as far as I can see. So I want to at least touch upon that. And week 7 is really about being a loyal employee. And really, as one of our readings says, does it make sense to be a loyal employee? Why should we be loyal? Week 8 has to do with profiteering. Profiteering, I consider to be businesses taking undue advantage of their customers. And this, I think, has come very prominently to mind in American society because of the aftermath of the pandemic and the supposed idea that businesses are taking advantage of inflation to raise prices even more. I don't know if that's true, but it's definitely a credible assertion. And then the question of a particular business, pharmaceuticals, whether or not it actually takes advantage of its customers because of its peculiar place in human life, health, using that as leverage. Week 9, I think, another understudied aspect of business ethics, and that's the ethics of debt, which is an incredibly important part of business, is being in debt, either as a business or really as a individual or even as a nation. The ethics of debt. This really goes pretty far back in moral and economic theory, especially in the European tradition. of whether it's ethical to lend people money at all, which it was not thought ethical to be for a very long time. And then, if it is ethical, the problems associated with perhaps taking advantage of people by getting them into debt. Week 10 and week 11 have to do with an important issue in business, and that's externalities. Externalities are the costs that businesses may impose on societies beyond prices. That is, especially things like pollution, but also things like risk. Externalities are the unpaid costs of doing business, basically the costs of doing business that businesses lay off on the society at large. We'll be talking about externalities in general, but in particular, we'll be talking about the externality of global warming, maybe the biggest externality in human history, where the burning of fossil fuels has imposed a huge cost, and a cost that in the future will be much larger even than it is now. Looking at that by looking at the three-part documentary about how oil companies have dealt with the issue of global warming. We will end the course in weeks 12 and 13 with a general survey of another important part of business ethics, corruption, or what I've called corruption, bribery, and fraud. Looking at bribery, looking at business fraud, in particular instances of corporations, very famous scandals. This one here in week 13, engine trouble, has to do with the Volkswagen emission fraud scandal of several years ago, in which a company actively defrauded the people of the United States by faking their testable emission standards to circumvent pollution laws. And then finally, the untouchables, which really has to do with the gigantic business fraud of mortgage fraud that precipitated the 2008 financial crisis. So that is it. That is what we will read and why we will read it. You can think of the course as really having two parts. Week 1 through 5 is sort of classics in business ethics and fundamental issues in business ethics. And then weeks 7 through 13 is basic topics in business ethics.